Do you want to learn how to build your own AI chatbots in less than 20 minutes? Most people think you need complex setups or paid APIs, but actually you don't. In this video, I will show you the basic coding skills to run prompts in code for free. And by following my instructions, you will be able to code your own translator bot as well as a summarizer bot using open source large language models. So let's get started. Yeah, so here I'm in my Microsoft Visual Studio Code. And so the first thing I need to do is to open the right folder. And so here I go to the folder where I have already prepared a Jupyter notebook that we will use. I will also put in the description to the video a link to this notebook if you want to try it out later on. So I will now open this notebook. So here you can see it. And now I can start explaining you a bit what we need to do. And the first step we will need to do is we need to install some packages. And packages are kind of little pieces of software that will allow Python to execute certain commands. And the package that we need to kind of download now is the Groq package, because that's what we will use. Now, how can we do that? I can simply now do that by creating a new file. So I will briefly create a new Jupyter notebook file. And I will now type in pip install, let me do it right, pip install Groq. And now I simply have to execute this. I need to choose my Python environment. So I will take my newest Python environment here. And now we have to briefly wait. And this is now actually simply kind of downloading the package on my computer. So this is kind of the first step I need to do. And when this is ready, then we can start using this package. Yeah, so now the package is successfully installed. So now I can go back to my initial Jupyter notebook here. And now we have to kind of enable these packages. And I actually need two. I need to import OS. This is a standard package, so it's pre-installed for you. This is something that we will need to be able to read files. So that's import OS. And then here I need to type in from Groq import Groq. And here it's with a big G. So these are the two things I now have to kind of enable. And then I have to press here play. Again, I need to choose my Python environment. And now it will load both packages. And so now both packages are loaded. The next step we will need to do is we need to have an API key to communicate with Groq. Now, how can you get such an API key? Now we briefly have to go to the website of Groq and I will show you how to do this. Yes, so now I'm at the website groq.com. So this is kind of the platform that we will use. Now, the first time that you will go here, you will have to create a login. You can do that with your Google account or just using an email address and password. Now, I have already done that, so I can immediately start using it. And now we can go here to get started. And then we go to another website, and here actually we can go to what is called API keys. Yes, and here you can then click on create an API key, and then I can give it a name. So now I could say test and press submit. And then you will see that I get this long kind of password, which is an API key. And I've now blurred this one because, like any password, it's always good to keep these things secure, yeah? So make sure that other people cannot get access to your API keys. In this case, actually not that problematic because we're just using free API keys, but still it's good practice, as with all passwords, to keep them secret. And then you can simply copy them. And so what I now will do is to copy them into a text file and then save that text file and call it Groq. Yeah? And then we can use that API key in our VS environment. So I could now copy it and then go to a text file, open a text file here. Yeah, so let me do that. And I paste my key into the file and then I save it as, and I call it, and I put it into the same folder as my other files, and then you call it groq.txt, and in that way you can save. Yes, so now we are back into our Visual Studio Code, and you see here that I now have this groq.txt file here. So this is the file where I only have my API key, and now I have to run this code. And what does this code mean? So let me briefly show it that we can see the full code here. So, and we say here, we open the file groq.txt. The encoding is UTF-8. That's simply to make sure that it nicely processes all the letters in the text. And we call that file API key. Yeah? So the string that is in the file, we give it the name API key. So that's what we're doing. And we're saying open this file, and then the string that you can find in this file, so the text string, that's now the variable API key. And then we do this part of the coding, and this simply means that we now allocate this variable to the full environment that we will use as a Groq API key. And that means that from now on, in this particular file, when I need an API key, it will always use this Groq API key. So with this coding, I can simply read and kind of store my API key without disclosing it. Yes, you could also here simply do something like API key equals and then between brackets and then enter the API key. But again, then we're actually kind of disclosing the password, and that's not really seen as a safe option. Although here for testing, it would not be a big problem, but it's simply kind of best practice to never disclose explicitly API keys in your coding. So that's why we applied this approach. So now it will read a file that is locally on my computer and then allocate the string that is in that file as the API key. And now I can start using this API key throughout the coding that I use here. So that's the first thing we need to do. So now we can start coding with this API key. And so as an example, what I want to do now is actually to build a kind of translator chatbot. And that means I can give as user a word or a sentence, and then the large language model needs to translate it. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Now, as mentioned, we use here Groq, and when you start building with large language models, it's always then good to go to the documentation. And that's what developers use to find out how do I exactly have to write my code. So now we will go back to the website to see the documentation. Yes, so I'm back here in my Groq, and now I will go here to docs. That's for documentation. And typically you will see then something called quick start. And this is actually typically a kind of instruction how you can easily start using the particular coding here. And typically you will now see an example. So again, if I scroll down, we indeed are using Python, so that's good. It's indeed telling me here that I need to install Groq. We already did that. And then here actually it gives me an example of code that I need to use if I want to kind of execute a prompt. And you see it here a bit, these packages we already did. Then we need to define a client. Yeah? So our client is the Groq client. And this would be the chat completion part. So this will be the part that I need to add in my coding to start executing a prompt. And so what we can now easily do is actually to copy paste this into Visual Studio Code and then adjust it to our specific situation. So let's briefly do that. So I will copy paste this part now, and I go back to my Visual Studio Code and press it here. And now we can kind of see the code. So the client, we will use the Groq client, the API key we actually already defined up front. So this actually we can now delete because it will always use the API key. So I will simply now delete this. We don't really need it. So I can just close it like this now. And you see now it kind of starts writing in kind of this light gray additional text. And that's actually the GitHub Copilot agent that will continuously try to help me to think about what is actually what you want to write here. Now, at the moment, we will quite ignore that because I first want you to really code yourself and not really rely too much on these agents. Later on, we will do that a lot. But at the moment, I really want to understand you the essentials. So let's now, for most of the time, ignore this kind of suggestions. So this was just what we copy pasted. And so here we say chat completion, in chat completion, create a message. So here within these brackets, we actually have to create the message. And so the role that we want to have is the user. And so here now in content, here is where I need to write my prompt. Yeah, like you would write in ChatGPT a prompt. This is the place where I want to write my prompt. Yeah? And so here, actually now, you see, it already gives me a suggestion. Translate the following English text to French. Hello, how are you? Yeah? And actually, this is what we can use. So now I can just press tab, and now it becomes very visible. Now you can think about, how did it now know that you wanted to translate? Actually, it knows it because here I have added some text as structure. If you start with this kind of sign, this is just for structure. And because I'm writing here that I want to build a translator chatbot, it actually understood what kind of prompt I want to write. Yeah? So now I have written a prompt saying translate the following English text to French. Hello, how are you? And then here I have defined now the model that it will use. And this is Llama 3.370B versatile. So this is one of these open source models. Yeah, so whereas the ChatGPT, Gemini, Anthropic, these are all closed models. Llama, for instance, is an open model. Actually, in Groq, you can choose different ones, and I will show you that later. But now let's just use this Llama model. It's an open source model. And then finally, I have to print out the text. And the text will be part of a longer object. And I will immediately explain that a bit more, but this was just what I copy-pasted out of the documentation. So now let's at least already try to run it to see if it works. And we should then get as output the translation of this text. So now I can press run, and actually I get an error message. Yeah, this is what sometimes happens when you do coding, that you get an error message. And then actually we need to go down. And here I get what is the problem. So now it's saying the API client option must be set either by passing API key to the client or by setting the Groq API key environment variable. Now I already did that, but I think I know already what the problem is. The problem was that I have not kind of played this particular block of text. So now I will play it. And then now it will work out. This error was quite straightforward. Based on the description, I could understand what was the problem. Very often I have no clue. And what I would then do is simply copy paste this error message, put it into ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT will give you an explanation what the problem is. And very often it will help you then to solve that problem. But now I was able to find it out myself. So now we will try again. So I press enter, and now we get a green one, so now it should be okay. And let me see, and indeed it's saying now as output the translation of hello, how are you to French is bonjour, comment allez-vous? Yeah, which is actually fully accurate. So in this way you can see that I've now already executed my first prompt encoding. Now very briefly, you see here this kind of complex thing saying chat completion choices 0 message.content. And in the end, you can see here with this kind of code, we create a chat completion variable. And that's what we have created. So now if I would just want to see the chat completion, let me add some code here. So I do now chat completion so that we can see how that looks like. So I press enter. And actually this is a very long object that consists of all kinds of parts. Yeah? So you have to see this a bit as a complex onion. And if you want to get a specific output, you have to unpeel the onion. And what we did here, if we go back to this print statement, was already unpeeling the onion. Yeah? So one part of the chat completion is choices. Then choices is a list. And the first element of the list, which is actually on place 0, that contains then a message, and in that message there is a content. Yeah? So you could now fully kind of unpeel that onion if you want, but now just for the sake of simplicity, we know that actually the output of my prompt is situated in this particular place. So that's why I wanted to print out this particular part. And that's actually what we wanted. Yeah, but so if you want to do that, you can really unpeel the onion if you would want to. Yeah, so this is a first example. Let's now go to a second example. So now what I want to do is I have here added text about Tesla. Yeah, so this is quite a long text. And imagine that I now want to summarize this text. And of course, we could now simply again copy paste this and change the prompt. But I also want to show you a second approach how you can easily start building prompts. Yeah? And in order to do so, we need to go back to our Groq.com website. Yeah, so here we're back in Groq.com, and now instead of docs, I go to the Playground. And this is actually a place where developers can experiment with large language models. And the nice thing is actually that here on the left-hand side, you can write your prompts and it will immediately adjust the code on the right-hand side. And here you see two things, namely system and user. And this is typically what developers do. So system is kind of an overall description how the prompt should behave. And user is then really the specific input that you want to give. So in this case, as a system, we want to build a kind of summarizer. Yeah? So I could now type in here, you are an expert in summarizing text. And then in the user part, I can give the specific text that I want to summarize. So if I now go back to my Visual Studio Code, I could simply copy paste this text part. Yeah? That's as a user, this is the text that I want to actually have. So I copy paste that, I go back to my Groq and I paste it in here. Yeah. So this is now what I want to do. And now you will see that on the right-hand side, it actually has prepared already the full code for me. Yeah? So here we can see then under role, and we have now two things, not only role user as in the prior example, but we also have a role system. And you can see it now nicely added the text that I have provided here. And actually here you can now also choose different kinds of models. Yeah? So in the prior example, we used the Llama model, but that was the Llama Versatile and whatever. Yeah, this one, the Llama 3.370, so I could choose that again. But we can also choose different models. And for instance, OpenAI has also created some open source models, yeah, so models that you can use for free. So now we can use this, for instance, and then you see that the model now is this one. And now, again, I can simply copy paste this text. Yeah? So we copy paste it, we bring it to our own coding. Yeah? So I will now create we actually don't need this. So let me remove this. So I can now simply copy paste this part. And now if I execute this, I should already receive my output. And I get a green indication, so something worked out. And yes, I now indeed see here that as output, I get a summary of the text. So now I get a shorter text, so indeed my summarizer has worked. Yeah, so these were the first two examples of how you can start prompting in coding. Now you can ask yourself, what is the deal? I could also have done this in ChatGPT, but what I will show you in the next video is that this gives you already quite some opportunities to start automating workflows. And that's what I will discuss in the next video. But first, try it out yourself. Again, in the descriptions, you will have a link to this notebook if you want, but just play a bit with it yourself so that you understand and that you are able to execute your own prompts for free using the Groq platform. Okay, thanks for your attention. Bye.